Everyone remembers the Exxon Valdez as a night a drunk captain wrecked an oil tanker, but when 11 million gallons of oil started pouring into Alaska, the captain wasn't even at the wheel. He was asleep in his cabin, and a jury later cleared him of intoxication. So who was steering, and how did one missed turn rewrite the law for every oil tanker in America? Let's get into it. So here's a picture. The Exxon Valdez is a giant, almost 990 feet long, a single-hull crude tanker. Remember that word, single hull, one layer of steel between the oil and the ocean. Hold that thought, because it's the whole reason this video exists. She loads up at the Valdez terminal in Alaska, the end of the big Trans-Alaska pipeline, with about 53 million gallons of crude oil on board. Her job's simple, carry it south, easy money. This run had been done thousands of times. It's the night of March 23, 1989. The ship pulls out at 9:12 p.m. A harbor pilot guides her through the tricky narrow part, then climbs off and heads home. Totally normal. Captain Joe Hazelwood takes control. Now here's where it gets interesting. There's ice in the water. Chunks breaking off a nearby glacier, drifting right into the shipping lane. So Hazelwood radios the Coast Guard and asks to steer around it. Out of the marked outbound lane, across the inbound one. Permission granted, still totally legal. Ships do this. But the ship's now pointed at open water. And out there is Bligh Reef, a rock shelf sitting right in the path. The plan is simple. Steer back into the safe lane before you reach it. So Hazelwood sets it up. He tells the third mate, Gregory Cousins, here's the spot, turn the ship back at this point. Then he leaves the bridge and goes to the cabin. And this is the quiet tragedy of the whole thing. Cousins is a good officer, but he's exhausted. Crews on these ships had been cut down over the years, people working long, brutal hours. And he's not actually licensed to pilot this particular stretch of water on his own. The turn point comes, and the turn doesn't happen. Maybe a miscommunication, maybe the workload. People still argue about the exact why. But the ship just keeps going, straight, towards the reef. By the time anyone realizes, it's too late to fix it. 6 hard jolts. The Exxon Valdez grinds onto Bligh Reef and stops dead, pushed on the rock. 8 of her 11 cargo tanks tear open. And then there's this radio call. The captain gets on to the Coast Guard traffic center, and you can almost hear how calm he is. Almost too calm.
We've fetched up on the ground and evidently leaking some oil.
Evidently leaking some oil. That's the understatement of the decade, because right then, under the surface, the oil is gushing out. Not a trickle, millions of gallons in the first 3 hours. By the time the sun comes up, the water around the ship is black. Now, you'd think this is where the cavalry shows up, right? There was supposed to be a plan for exactly this. If a tanker ever spilled here, crews were supposed to wrap it in a floating barrier, known as a boom, to trap the oil within 5 hours. 5 hours. It took 36. Why? The emergency barge, the one that's supposed to carry thousands of feet of boom, had been emptied out and basically forgotten. The gear wasn't ready. Nobody could move fast enough. And for the first couple days, the weather was actually calm. A gift. A window to scoop up the oil while it was still in one place. But they wasted it. And then on about day 3, a storm rolled in and smeared the oil across the entire sound. Game over. Now it's not a spill you can contain. It's a spill you just witness. The oil eventually hit around 1,300 miles of shoreline. It traveled hundreds of miles down the coast. Think about that. That's like a spill in one city, washing up in another state. And here's the part that's hard to watch. The wildlife. Best estimates, around 250,000 seabirds. Thousands of sea otters, hundreds of seals, hundreds of eagles. A pod of orcas that lost members it never recovered. And we only ever found a fraction of the bodies, most just sank. The cleanup was almost surreal. Thousands of workers, hundreds of boats, blasting rocks with hot water. They literally washed oiled otters and birds with Dawn dish soap. The same stuff in your kitchen. And here's the twist. That high-pressure hot water blasting? Turns out it was cooking the tiny creatures living in the rocks, doing more harm than good. A lot of scientists think the winter storms ended up cleaning the beaches better than the people did. Exxon says it spent around $2.1 billion cleaning up. And decades later, you can still dig down on some of those beaches and hit oil. It never fully went away. And it wasn't just the animals. Whole fishing towns, places like Cordova, built their entire lives on these waters. The herring fishery collapsed a few years later and basically never came back. Bankruptcies, divorces, families wrecked. The damage went way past the shoreline. Okay, back to the question we opened with, the drunk captain, because this is where the real story splits from the headlines. Here's what actually happened in court. Captain Hazelwood was not at the wheel. He had handed it off and gone below. They tested his blood, but about 10 hours later, the sample was mishandled and a jury found him not guilty of operating that ship drunk. The only thing they had convicted him of was a misdemeanor, negligent discharge of oil, a fine, and community service. Now, marine casualty investigators did say alcohol probably played a role in him leaving the bridge. So it's not that he's some innocent hero. But drunk captain crashes tanker? That cartoon version? It lets everybody else off the hook. Because when the National Transportation Safety Board dug in, they didn't blame one man, they blamed the system. The overworked, undermanned crew, Exxon for not giving them enough rest and people, and even the Coast Guard for a vessel tracking system that wasn't really watching that far out. Everybody failed a little. And when everybody fails a little, you don't fix it by punishing one guy, you fix it by changing the rules. And they did. In 1990, Congress passed the Oil Pollution Act, also known as OPA 90. It had been stuck for years. Exxon Valdez was what finally broke it loose, and it changed the whole game. 3 big things. Number 1, the big one, double hulls. Remember that single layer of steel? OPA said no more. New tankers and U.S. waters have to be built with 2 hulls, an outer skin and an inner skin. So next time its ship hits a reef, it tears the outside open, but the oil stays sealed in behind the second wall. And they didn't just do it for new ships. They set a countdown to phase the old single-hull tankers out completely. That deadline ran all the way to 2015. So an entire generation of tankers got retired because of this one night. Number 2, money and responsibility. Before this, the people who spilled oil could limit how much they had to pay. OPA flipped it. You cause the spill, you're on the hook for the cleanup, with no cap. And they beefed up a national fund paid for by a tax on oil, so there's always money ready to respond fast. And number 3, that 36-hour disaster? OPA made it law that tankers and terminals have to file a real response plan and prove that they can handle a worst-case spill, with the gear actually staged and ready. No more empty barges sitting in for repairs while the ocean turns black. There's even a happy little footnote. Years later, another tanker took a similar gash to the hull, and because it had that second skin, almost no oil got out. The rule worked, the lesson stuck. So here's where it lands for you. Every time you see an oil tanker today, riding the horizon, it's almost certainly carrying its cargo inside 2 hulls instead of 1. And the reason for that isn't some engineer's bright idea. It's a reef in Alaska, one tired officer, a missed turn, and a coastline that paid for it. One quick thing to put a bow on it. People always ask, and the punishment? A jury hit Exxon with $5 billion. 19 years of appeals later, the Supreme Court knocked it down to about $500 million for the company, roughly a few days of profit at the time. And the ship herself? They fixed her up, renamed her a bunch of times, and banned her from ever returning to Prince William Sound. She spent her last years hauling ore to the other side of the world, and was finally taken apart for scrap on a beach in India. The captain got the headlines, but the reef, the failure, and the law, that's what actually changed the world. If you made it this far, thanks for hanging out. This is the first one in a series I'm doing on the disasters that quietly rewrote the rules we all live by now. If that's your kind of thing, stick around for the next one. It's the most famous shipwreck in history, and the night it sank, it rewrote the rules for every ship that sailed that since. No pressure, I'm just glad you're here, and see you in the next one.